Welcome to Surviving the Dream with your hosts, Casey Arnold
and David Conley.
We're here to talk to people who seem to have their dream job and find out, what did it take? Is it what they imagined? Is it worth it? How do they do it?
Join us as we uncover the secrets of surviving the dream.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Casey. Hi, here we are, surviving the dream. Another week surviving the dream.
Another week. We're still here. They haven't weeded us out yet.
Well, they've tried, but they have failed.
Our hope prevails.
Our hope prevailed. Well, your hope, my slightly cynical. But I've got a great guest for us today. I'm very close to this guy, and I'll tell you why, because he lives next door to me. He also happens to be in the same industry as you and I. I'm not talking about the basket weaving industry or the steel industry. He's actually in the entertainment industry. But he is like on the other side of the camera to a performer because he actually operates the camera.
Oh, he makes sure all of our hard work gets captured.
Yeah. He's the man who's closest to you. He's also a director of note, a DP of note. This man is a Renaissance man and my neighbor. It's Eric Dyson.
Hello, Eric.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Your studio is fantastic. I got to say, It's not what I expected in a podcast studio, but you guys have really, really dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's with this baby.
Thank you. Anybody listening, you just imagine whatever that would look like for you. It's like Willy Wonka over here.
Willy Wanker for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, Eric, so you have worked on many prestigious shows. You're right there, aren't you? I mean, is this what you're the man behind the lens. What's that like? I mean, like you've got the relationship with the director, with your crew, and with the actors.
That's right. Thanks for having me. And it's an interesting perspective being camera operator, sometimes cinematographer. In one ear, you're listening to what the director wants for the shot. Sometimes what they say they want is not going to translate in what you're doing. So you have to know when you're going to give them what they want and when you're going to give them what they don't want, but they actually like better. And sometimes you have to make it seem like it was their idea. Like there's a little bit of an ego stroke happening. And then also sometimes you have to be prepared for when you don't give them what they want to back up what you did. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. And then also you're interpreting, if the director's at Video Village and you're 5 feet, 10 feet from the actor and someone calls cut, a lot of times the actor will look right at the camera or at the operator and like, how was that? And, sometimes you have to be a little bit cautious about when you give notes or when you give input on what it's going to take to give the director what they want. And sometimes you have actors who are so in their head and so about the scene, like you have to know when to just like not say anything because you definitely don't want to be in the crosshairs when the actor goes, sorry, I blew it. I was getting all these notes from Eric right before we rolled. And so
has that ever happened? Has that?
Yeah.
Oh, it has. Yeah. Oh, great.
But in my defense, it was a sweet little innocent, probably 8 or 9 year old kid. And the shot was not lining up right? You just can't keep going again. You have to try to fix it. So I said, hey, so-and-so, like just slide a little to your left or just do this a little bit, da-da-da. And he's like, okay, like this? Yeah, that's going to be perfect. And then he forgot it. And he did what he did the first take, and the director said, why is this going wrong? And he said, well, Eric told me to do blah, blah, blah. But he didn't do what I told him. He did what he wanted to do. So, there's times like that when you're a little bit cross. And then, of course, the director's like, Eric, if you have any other bad ideas, keep them to yourself.
So tell us, when Christian Bale grew up, was he different with you?
When what?
When Christian Bale grew up, was he different? No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone there.
So wait, I'm guessing you have to have like a lot of experience to get to these different points and you learn a lot of the relationship navigation, maybe the hard way, like that, right? Like how much you can get away with saying, and maybe different directors are more open to input, and it depends on your relationship. Like, what was your path to get there, and how do you navigate all of that?
Yeah. So what was my path to get to this, where I am now, right?
Yeah.
The
Living the
road.
dream, Eric.
In this
You're
beautiful
living the
industry
dream.
of ours.
Yeah. So I started when I was super young. When I was 16 years old, I started working at a production company, super small place, right on Hollywood Boulevard. Like, it could not be more the Hollywood success story. Very little pay, and went away to film school, came back. I had that relationship established. I worked with that guy a little bit post film school. I got a production assistant job at Amblin Entertainment, which is, Spielberg's company. And I started in post production for those guys. And I had a great experience. In retrospect, I wish I would have done that experience different. The path when you were there as a PA was you work as a PA in-house, and then a show comes up and you go on a show as a production assistant, and then you leave and never come back. Or you become a production assistant in development or in a specific department, and you sort of ingratiate yourself to those folks. And someday I want to be in development, or I want to be a writer, so I'm going to be a PA now. Some of those people went on to do great things, and some of those people are selling life insurance now and totally different. But I always kind of wanted to pursue a camera career. So I met a handful of directors of photography that were doing shows at Amblin. So I started in post-production on Hook. And while I was there, we did Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, a handful of TV shows. And I got on a show called Sequest, which was a Roy Scheider show. And it was miserable, but I didn't know it was miserable because I didn't have anything else to compare it to as an on-set PA. All the other PA stuff I'd done had been music videos and crappy commercials and, dragging cables through urine-soaked alleys and syringes in downtown LA.
Sounds glamorous.
Yeah, living the dream, weren't you, Eric?
Yeah. But
the cable coiling is very important.
Yeah.
You know what? To this day, when I see people wrapping up cables, right, if it's the over the elbow, over the wrist extension cord Home Depot special, I got to say something. So, yeah, you're right. There's a wrong way and a right way to wrap those cables.
That's one of the things I remember from film school also, that it was important. So wait, but you said you always knew you wanted to do camera. Were you... The audience can't see you have a bunch of super cool cameras behind you. Were you the kid that was making movies when he was little, or doing photography, or you just were only commenting on what things looked like when you were watching TV? And it was I don't care what they say. Look at that background.
Yeah.
Or that lighting.
Yes. I was very much sort of a tech nerd, kind of AV club guy in high school. I'm tall, but I'm not good at basketball. So, wanting to do movies and then being involved in theater when I was in high school was kind of the genesis. My dad was a jazz musician and amateur black and white photographer, and we always had cameras and a darkroom at home. So that's how I got the camera bug. Cool. When I was in, 16 or 17, my parents bought me a Betamax movie camera, which I still own. And at that time, which was a long time ago, people didn't really have video cameras, and nobody was walking around school with a camcorder documenting what was happening. So, I would set up projectors. I would run films. I would videotape when we had, special guests. I went to high school in the middle of Hollywood, so we had a lot of Hollywood-centric people coming in there. So I was constantly able to get out of class, constantly, doing these extracurricular camera things. And then that was sort of my thing in film school. Like almost everybody wanted to write and direct, but not everybody knew the technical end of things, right? Like how
You're talking to two of them.
Okay, so you realize when people say, "Hey, I got this great idea for a project. I think it would be awesome for you to help me on." That really means I want you to do everything because probably I don't know how to do anything. So you end up like the camera and the film days, making sure you had the right film stock, the right filtration, if it was indoors, if it was outdoors. How do you light something so it doesn't look like a crappy, how do you light something with showing some relationship to the scripted material? So all those things became something that I kind of sort of got good at. When I started working full-time in camera, when I gave up my prestigious production assistant job, I started out, ground level, which was I was a film loader, and it's as basic as it sounds. And you were loading films in these magazines and making sure the cameras had enough film stock to keep shooting.
And I can't tell you how important that job is, because my first short film that I directed, the film loader messed up. And it was in those days, for all our younger listeners, where you made it, where the film's exposed. I mean, you have to go to the lab and look at it. And I just realized, oh my God, the whole scene has been completely trashed. Because it's the most inexperienced person on the set is goes, "Oh, you're the film loader, great, yeah, you've never done this before," and you're like, it's probably one of the most important things.
That's right.
In those days. Yeah.
I don't have too many disaster stories. I did work on a commercial at the airport, LAX, and the client was they just had time to shoot planes landing and taking off. Right, we're going to leave in an hour, blah blah blah, and they were in a rush, banging on the darkroom door. "Hey, we really got to get that film and get on the plane." And so as I'm opening the magazine that holds the film, the brim of my hat hit a little light switch over the workbench. And the lights came off, whoop, and I smacked them off. And it was like, it happened so quickly, I could see the edge of the film, but, it wasn't circumstances where I could say, I may have fogged the day's work. Go ahead. So they had so many steps before they were going to process the film. I thought, they're going to be in Europe. They're going through more than one possible checkpoints with the film. Like anything could happen. And thankfully, I never heard back from those guys that it was a disaster. So
they might be hearing this right now going, that explains
That's
it.
the guy.
We always wondered how it happened.
Yeah. 25 years ago, I had this major project and Eric Dyson screwed it, my life. That's the guy who's selling insurance in Berlin now, isn't it?
That's right.
That's what it's right. How did you, so you started off with the still image. What drew you to the moving image?
Well, I never wanted to be a still photographer. Mm-hmm. All my friends in high school, out of our 6 or 7 or 8, where everyone was film adjacent. Either, someone was related to someone famous in the industry, someone knew someone who was a writer, and blah, blah, blah. So we had these dumb stories. Like the first short we made was called The Dirty Dozen, and it was about a dozen killer eggs that
that sounds like a hit to me.
It was.
It was a smash. Yeah. Oh God.
In the spirit of surf Nazis must die, and those kind of B movies, it was right up there.
Right.
So we would write this stuff. We didn't have any editing software, so we would shoot the scenes sequentially, and had to sort of like finesse the delay when you hit the button and you heard the machines turning to make sure someone did their line at the right time. So it was
this
like
on Betamax? Or
this
was on
on Betamax.
So you hit on sorry, go ahead.
So when you hit the button, and by the time you were done shooting, and we would do 3 o'clock after school on Friday, stay up all night doing this, these horrible scenes, and the next afternoon. So by the time you were done filming, it's like that sucker is in the can, literally. Like it's ready to go. You just need a Betamax machine to play it on.
That is awesome. But you hit on something interesting, that you went to high school here. I also went to high school here. So it did feel very attainable. And it's right. It's like you said, it was like, oh, this big director's kid goes to school with me, and this big producer's kid, and we're all making a movie together. So when you're like 17 years old and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a director. Yeah, we're making movies. Like no one around you is like, that's crazy talk, kid. Come up with something practical. Cause it's part of the zeitgeist. Whereas Dave, I don't know, did they give you one of those tests where they said that's not an option?
I think you're talking about a very unique set of circumstances of being brought up in Los Angeles. I think the rest of the world says, come on, that's ridiculous. But I kind of like that about LA, because you can be ridiculous and go, you know what, I'm doing this thing, and so is my neighbor. And
the only way to make it through, right? How do we wake up and decide it's going to happen if all we're doing is being practical?
It's a city made up of impracticality, but people do it, and because you're so close, you can touch. You can, oh, I see that guy. Oh my word, there's George Clooney having a coffee.
Right. So and the thing that I didn't realize this till I was much later, much older. Like the household that I grew up in, my father was a musician. My mother started her own business, successful entertainment payroll company in 1976. So all the things that are not supposed to work practically, like in those days, women didn't start their own businesses. Musicians, they weren't able to keep a household together. But because that was the norm, and I was a little bit ignorant to the rest of the world, like making movies is just, of course, it's something we're going to do because everybody's talking the same language. But it's not until you kind of get away from that and get some life experience and you realize, wow, this business is not fair. It's not consistent. And what if I would have become a dentist? Maybe I would be looking at being able to retire happily and travel the world.
You see, Eric, I grew up in a mental hospital, so Hollywood just makes complete sense to me.
You fit right in.
Yeah.
How did you know when you like crossed the line and it was going to be consistent? Consistent. I'll put that in quotes.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good enough at this. I do it enough that I think I can live a life. Yeah.
That I feel like because I started every position moving up in the camera department, and I tended to kind of linger there a little bit too long. So typically in the olden days, it went film loader, second assistant clapper, first assistant focus puller, camera operator, director of photography. And any one of those spots you can stay at for a lifetime if you want. But as a loader and as a second AC, I got onto television. I was deep into, all I did was television. And we were doing 20, 24, 25 episodes. So that's 9 months worth of work. So at the time, it's like, all right, I'm going to start a show and I'll be booked for 9 months. Maybe I'll do something a little different in the hiatus, but typically we would know before we wrapped if we were coming back the next season. So now, you did 9 months, you got 3 months off, and then you're going to do another 9 months. Like, I could have rode that gravy train for years, and I did for a long time. But like, hey, now things are different, and they only do 8 to 10 episodes, and, the hours are shorter. So I'm really, when in the motion picture, there's motion picture industry health plan, right? And you can log all of your hours and see what your total is. So mine go back to probably 89 or 1990. So I look at the hours and there's like 65,000 hours that I've worked that have been logged. Wow. And that's kind of a cool thing to have that perspective. Because I feel like new people coming in the industry who have hopes and dreams, it's going to be very difficult to reach those numbers in their 30 years or so because things are changing so much.
Is that a good thing in some ways, though, that the hours are changing? I mean, is there a positive there rather than having to do 14 to 16-hour days?
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, it's a positive in that, like, there were so many. So I worked on 24, right, which was a show that took place in 24 hours. And you knew when the hour of the episode got to be later in the day, it was going to be a miserable week for the rest of the show because we had night exteriors. And there's nothing worse than sitting on a camera case at the beach, freezing cold at 3 a.m, and like really putting things in perspective. So there's been a shift towards fewer hours, partly because of fatigue, because they're more conscientious about making a safe work environment, but also it does get down to money, right? It's cheaper to do a show that's all on stage that only does 10 hours a day. And honestly, if and I think this goes for a lot of people, if you knew you were going to be working consistently for a year or 9 months and you were only going to work 8 to 10 hours a day, that would be slam dunk, no problem. But it's the feeling of like, I don't know what my next job is, so I hope I have to work 70 hours this week just so I can survive.
Yeah.
Like, what a crappy way to make a living.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 words that I would advise any writer to think very carefully about before committing to a script: exterior and night. I've been through it, and I've been on my own show where it's exterior, night, and I'm 3 o'clock in the morning. I am hating myself, and knowing that everybody else is hating the writer. Going, you could have done this in the interior during the day. But it's fascinating as well about that change of thought. I mean, years ago, I worked with someone from the Berlin Ensemble, which was just as the wall had come down in, I think it was 1989. And it was really interesting working with Eastern Bloc actors. And we were Western actors, and we were in England, but we were all worried about the next job. And they weren't. They were like going, you guys are crazy in the West. You're so worried and nervous and tense because you don't know what. We've got a job for life.
Right.
In the Eastern Bloc, we're actors. That's what we do. And I was going, and part of me was going, oh no, I've got it all wrong. I want to go and live in Berlin and get a job for life.
I mean, I did a movie in Sweden a bunch of years ago, and it's almost like everybody's movie job was the other job. Like, very few people like did this full time, or they were so kind of versatile and not pigeonholed in what they were doing. Someone who was doing the craft service 2 weeks from now is going to be doing something else on another show. So it was a little more of a just do whatever, and a little more camaraderie, I think. And definitely a lot more like everyone's, even like the lead actress was setting up lunch tables because her scene wasn't happening. If they wanted to work overtime, they had to ask the crew permission. Like, is it okay? Can anybody stay if we go an hour too late? It's like, wow, what a civilized way to make movies.
Work-life balance. They are better at that over there for sure. Do you feel like technology change has shifted things?
Yes. So technology. So I started in film, and now everything is digital. It's changed the amount of, I guess you'd call it sort of respect for the hierarchy on the set. Like now, a lot of first assistant directors who cannot control their sets will be like, "Wow, roll sound, roll the camera," and I'll say, "Why are we rolling the camera?" And there's like the actors aren't even on set. I know, but nobody does anything unless the cameras are rolling. If this was film, like that's the very last thing you do. But it's also, it has relieved a lot of the mystery. Like when you film a scene, the director of photography has a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like. But nobody really knows until they look at dailies. And even the dailies are just a broad strokes color timing. So it kind of has shifted some of the power from the director of photography to the producers on down to, like, I don't know, whoever, the caterer. Like, everyone's looking at monitors and they can see what the lighting is like, and everyone has an opinion. And the director of photography will be on set lighting, get back to Video Village, and there's a couple of jaboni writers or producers saying, well, it does look a little bit too dark over here or light over there. Like, okay, now we got to go back in and change things because that's what you want. So it has its trade-offs, some great and some not great. I will say the greatest thing is leveling of the playing field to allow independent, lower budget productions to really make something that looks fantastic. Whereas before, maybe you got some 16 millimeter film, or if you were lucky, you got some 35 millimeter film, but the discrepancy is not as huge as it used to be.
I remember reading Sidney Lumet's book shortly after he'd passed away, and its final chapter was his biggest regret that he wasn't around for longer during the digital era, which was surprising because this is a guy who's made some of the most amazing films. And I remember getting into discussions with people. There was a big revolution of like, we should stick to our guns and we should still create, movies on film. And he was someone that I remember reading that and going, oh, actually, no, he said that it was very liberating. And he wished he had 20 more years as a director, because he felt that it was more liberating working digitally.
Yeah, I don't think digital takes as much away from the product as people originally thought.
Right.
Like, people originally thought, oh, it's high definition. Women are going to look terrible, and guys are going to look like monsters. And there's all these cables coming from everywhere. So that fear has gone to this way, the back burner. But I guess now you really have to think about what is the next iteration, especially now when content, the content faucet is being really ratcheted down.
I still think we want it to look like film, don't we? I think that psychologically the eye wants it to look like film as much as we can.
Yeah.
I remember my first camera test when we were going digital, and this was in 2007, 2008, and it was just happening then. Do we make this on film? And there's budgets were being spun in different ways. But I remember going and watched the camera tests, and then they were showing me, going, well, that's film, isn't it? And then it was the Vericam at the time, and they went, no, that's actually video. And I was like, oh, then we can do it. And that was from and I'm one of those people that I have no knowledge on. It's just the look. It was just the look. Going, oh, okay, then I can live with that.
Yeah, well, you also have to keep in mind people's imagination of video was a lot different 20 years ago. People's idea of video was like, well, then it's going to look like the news, or it's going to look like a crappy soap opera, and that's not what I want. And the imperfections of film are what people don't know they want, but what they actually want. And now, I don't know, with higher and higher resolution televisions and virtual goggles, and I don't know, like what's going to be next. And people are less concerned. They want to have an experience, I think. And that includes a well-written story, a well-acted cast, and if it looks great, then that's also, an added bonus.
So how do you think, like, teenage you who was starting this off in high school, what would he think about what you're doing these days and how it all panned out?
Well, if teenage me, let's see, would teenage me visit me in a time machine, or would I visit them and tell them? I guess teenage me would come to me.
He's here with you now. 16-year-old Eric is like, okay, man, show me our life. What does he think? He
would be like, this is bitching. Like, look at all this stuff that you've done. And like, I don't know what you're complaining about. There's a famous, I don't know if it's
his neighbor mainly. He's complaining about his neighbor. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, except for the guy who can't back his Tesla out of the driveway straight, you're doing pretty good, right? Being able to constantly remind yourself what you have now and when you wanted it to keep things in perspective. There was a time when I was super young at Universal Studios on the tour, thinking, oh, it would be so cool if I could just work somewhere, right? And then when I was at Amblin, I was driving a golf cart around, and we were going through the back lot and all this stuff. You're like right there. So, that kind of like childlike optimism and freshness, even now when I read a script or write a script or start a project or whatever, like maintaining that. It's like, even as crappy as things get, and you want to be like, you know what, fuck this industry, I'm going to go do something else. But you constantly find yourself like, okay, like it's like a bad date. Like, okay, maybe I'm going to give you one more try. There's probably a Taylor Swift song about this whole relationship and how I'm sacrificing myself to be part of it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
You must have to be so adaptable to survive in this industry. I mean, like, especially with what you're doing. I mean, like, we can argue that we writers can change this, but you've actually had to adapt with technology as well. And the whole.
Yeah. You have to be adaptable. You have to think about what your plan is and for how you're going to get through the scene. And when it all changes, you don't want to be the person there throwing a fit, because that slows things down. And you also don't want to be, like, in all my years, like, the thing that I always hated the most was the old bitter guy who's sitting there and is smoking a cigarette or drinking coffee or whatever, and like just so bitter about everything, and all these young guys and how they come into the business and how many divorces they've had and how alcoholic they are. And I'll work with all those people, but wow, like really try to be conscious of not. And my downfall are, the older you get, the younger your coworkers are. And I don't know if this works for acting so much, right? Like, you're not going to be a 55-year-old father of 3, and your wife or your counterpart is not going to be a 20. I mean, unless it's part of the story. But as a camera operator, I could very easily be taking information from a director of photography who's half my age and has zero to no experience, but may have just gotten it because they went to AFI with the director. So you have to be adaptable and flexible. And also remember, like, someone who's much younger and is part of the TikTok generation, like, you may be able to take things to put in your toolbox that this knucklehead is doing. So you don't want to shut yourself off just because you're old and it's always been done this way. Like, let those young whippersnappers come in, and they just might teach you a thing or two.
It's a good attitude.
Yeah. And what do you get a choice of your projects, or is it a case of like, and how does that work? Getting the job. So basically, someone's going, "Oh, I think Eric should shoot this." What happens?
It depends on how busy you are, and I feel like right now nobody is super busy or has been for the last couple of years. So these days, yes, you have a choice. You can always say no to stuff, but that assumes you'll be fine without working. Typically, as an operator, the past few years, the shows that I work on are generally people that I've worked with before. Either it's a season 2 or 3, or we did something else. Or you meet someone when you're not full-time and you just kind of bounce around from show to show. And that's also kind of a good way to spread your network a little bit. So you're not always depending on one director of photography or one producer to hire you, because you know what, when they go to Poland to do a television show, they're probably not going to take you with them. So definitely have to like diversify your playlist of who you're interacting with, and so you don't always get a choice. And I mean, it would be nice to be like, oh, here's 10 shows that want to hire me, let me pick whatever. But, I mean, even as an actor, like, oh, we want you to do a half-naked show about a podcast, but you only have to dress from the neck up. Do you want to do it? It shoots nights at the beach, and you get paid in a Subway sandwich. So you have to kind of.
Is that in breakdown? Because I am available.
Totally, I'm reading this off of what your agent just sent me.
Yeah, great. No, I'm in.
So you have to be flexible, I guess, right?
Yeah. Have you done? What's your dream job so far?
Like, out of all the shows, which one have I liked the most?
Yeah. And it might be for a different reason from what the audience might think. Is there a show that you've gone, you know what, this was the one that was the most creative, most fun, or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, I always try to keep in mind, like, but my next job might be better. So this year I did 2 back-to-back fantastic shows. One airs in November on Netflix, and that's a Ted Danson show called, when we shot it, it was called A Classic Spy. Now it's called, I think, The Man on the Inside or something like that. But that was great in that it was close to home. We rarely worked over 10 hours a day. And the vibe between all the actors was great, and the crew was great, and everybody wanted to be there, and the attitude was great. And then I followed that up with a mockumentary show that took me to Chicago, and I was there for 5 weeks, and then we were in San Francisco for a week. And the whole time, I mean, I know it was spring in Chicago, but the weather was great, my apartment was great, my rental car was great, my view was great, everything was so fantastic. Right. Like, and of course, if I was in Chicago now or a month from now, it would probably be a different story because of the weather. But there's usually things about a lot of shows that I really like a lot. And then there's always personality conflicts. But very rarely, like, I've never quit a show, and thankfully have never been fired off of a show. So it takes a lot for me to even be close to, like, you know what? Screw you guys, I quit.
How have you navigated the relationships like that, and like in your own life? How do you balance when you have a crazy 14-hour day, or you're out of town for 5 weeks and you still have a real life at home? Do you have a trick for that?
I don't know if that's a trick for it. I try to stay as evenly keeled as possible. We have, thankfully, 30 years of marriage under our belt and 3 kids, all of which have graduated college, and they all have jobs. But there was a time early on when my wife wasn't working, and I would be gone 12 or 14 hours a day. But I always took time off for Halloween and birthdays. And yeah, when you get home at 3 a.m. and they have a soccer game at 6 a.m, that's not so fun on Saturdays. But usually in terms of like personalities on set, and like there's like every douchebag wants to outdo the other douchebag, right? And it can be easy to get caught in the middle and to take everything personally. But generally, I feel like if you're not trying to be the loudest person in the room or on the set, or have the really, if you're not trying to make your point the most important point, you'll have a lot easier time navigating through all these personalities of these psycho people who are not getting enough sleep, are having bad nutrition, are probably just barely paying their bills. It's like a crock pot for a complete social breakdown on a TV set. And I've been on shows where that's happened, where they've cleared the set because the 2 actresses, the scene got a little too real, and now they're really fighting. Or I was on a show called Community when Chevy Chase said, "Fuck you guys, I quit," and walked off the set. So, yeah, those things happen. And actors show up drunk, and we have to do other things. So,
did he come back, or was it he just actually walked off and never came back?
He left. He did not come back the rest of the season, and the following season they brought him back as a hologram. So we shot his part of a scene just against a black backdrop, and they projected it onto a hologram. And that's when Jonathan Banks came in and took over as the elder statesman of the group.
Wow. What a great story.
So yes, the crew is like freaking out when that happens, right? Because they're like, hey, we're on a successful show. I've got 20 weeks of work I'm counting on. My kids are going to school. You just walked out. They might be canceling the show. Please think of all of those things. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bigger, that does go through your mind, but it's also, that there are so many bigger dollars above yours, like the network and the promise to deliver these episodes, and blah, blah, blah. The things that really make you like freak out as a crew member is like if the producers come down, whenever they want to tell everybody to get together, either someone has just died or the network is pulling the plug and we're wrapping the series tomorrow.
And you're thinking, oh, I hope someone died.
Yeah, please let it be. But that, that's happened on a couple times in my career. So, you just gotta, be ready to roll with it.
Talking of rolling with it, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, so we're going to ask you the questions that we ask everybody here, Rick. If you won the lottery, the big one, what would you do?
If I won the big one, what would I do? In the scope of living the dream?
Yeah, well, in this case, you've just been given that $100 million, Eric. He's going, there's a check. It's yours. Do what you want.
He's going to move away from his neighbor first.
I would. Then I could be able to afford to buy my neighbor drinks. At the bougie bar that they like to go to. No, I don't know. I guess if like my dream, what to do with all this money scenario would be, I have a couple projects that I feel like I could self-produce 2 movies in the next, 3 months, right? If I had all this money. I would do things like, it would be nice to pay off a house and pay off some student loans and do more traveling. The state of the industry and having to get really creative with my finances, like just having a money net to fall back into, I feel like that would be a huge relief. Like all the other stuff is fun, but I really don't want to die penniless and living in a YMCA or in my car without health care. So talk about surviving the dream. Those are the things that, people dream about nowadays that is tricky to survive.
Yeah, we won't let that happen to you, Eric.
Thank you so much. You keep sending animals over here. Now we have a cat in my house, thanks to my neighbor and the 12 kittens that they were fostering. So now I got this cat.
You got another mouth to feed. It's going the other way.
Mouth to feed.
So you feel good about yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Somebody's ringing. My question, what is your go-to snack? And does it change if you're on a nice, simple 10-hour day where it's reliable, or if you're 3 a.m. sitting on the beach on a camera case in the cold?
There's nothing you can put in your mouth at 3 a.m., and I mean nothing, that will make it better. My go-to snack is very simple, and even still, like other camera assistants who've worked with me over the years hand me, right? So a banana, a blueberry fig bar, a raspberry fig bar, and a cup of coffee. That is the easiest way for me to start my day. Partly because the coffee is, has its job, but all the other snacks, like when the shit hits the fan, like oftentimes I don't have time to eat what's at craft service, and I don't want to get messy because I'm eating a breakfast burrito. Like I like things that I can just put in my pocket if I have to, or just to sit down for a quick second. So it's simple, but you know what? Sometimes it's the simple things.
Yeah, you need that self-care so that you can be there for everybody.
That's right.
Now, you're going to upset some people here because I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite animal and why?
Wait a minute. You are or you're not going to ask me?
I'm going to ask you. I'm asking
My favorite animal and why?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Dave. My favorite animal. I really like horses.
Oh, okay.
And I've never owned a horse. I've ridden horses, but I really like. So I'm 6'3", and I feel like navigating through spaces, especially sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome, and I'm not always super smooth, but like I feel like horses are a little bit that way, like they're a little big and majestic, and I like an animal that can carry me. I don't always want to have to be carrying the animal. But I also like an animal that can clean up after themselves, which I have yet to find.
Cats mostly clean up after themselves?
Yes, they do. And I have zero qualms with this new cat. But
good. Because it's a beautiful cat.
I will say that the litter box is not nothing. The litter box is something.
It's not the best part.
Wait till you've got
Definitely
5 cats, Eric.
That's not going to happen.
Well, you say that.
Not with my neighbor with all the cats. I don't need more cats.
No.
I'll just go visit those cats.
Things happen in life, and sometimes you just go, well, that happened,
You do now have a lot of cats, Dave. That's something you can only do as a married person. As a single woman, if I had 5 cats, that is declaring to the world that I am done dating. So
that's right.
I will not be doing that.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
I saw a guy at the grocery store who looked so lonely at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, and he had a handful of Slim Jims, those little meat sticks, and about a dozen cans of cat food. And like, it just painted a picture for me. Like, if that's future me, wow, what a way to go.
Embrace it. He's probably very happy, actually.
Is he going to eat the Slim Jims or the cats? That's the question.
Do you remember there used to be an ad of an old lady at the grocery store with this cat food, and the tagline was, "This woman has no cats."
Right.
That's sad as hell.
That's sad. It's sad.
It was a different time.
Different times.
All right, we're going to ask our last question, and hopefully it will be more uplifting than that. Eric, if we really knew you, what would we know about you?
If you really knew me?
If we really knew you.
That's the best interpretation of that question I've ever heard. If you could really do me, would you? Yeah.
Really knew you.
If you really knew me, what would you know about me that you didn't really put together before? I guess I would say if you really knew me, you would be surprised at the playlists that I'm using while I'm either exercising or driving. Yeah, I feel like my playlist would paint a different perspective.
You're a little more eclectic than we might assume. Is that what you're saying?
He's a Swiftie. He's definitely a Swiftie, isn't he? You can tell.
I would definitely say I'm not a Swiftie. But I don't know if I hate eclectic. Yeah, but eclectic also has a certain amount of like baggage to it. Like, I'm smoking a cigarette and I have a beanie and I'm being eclectic, right? Like, come on, it's just music. Yeah.
Mind you, I have seen him with his beanie smoking a cigarette out on his balcony, listening to music. So, yeah.
But what's he listening to at this time? This is what we need to know.
It's Taylor. It's every time. Every time it's Taylor. Yeah.
All right. I guess we know. That's the real truth. That's your real secret. You're a secret Swiftie.
And what if Taylor Swift hears this podcast and she's like, that's the guy I need to hire on all my shows for
there you go.
Whatever.
I mean, she clearly knows some things about some things.
Yeah.
She's doing all right.
That's right. She don't know nothing. So, she's doing all right.
We might have just changed your career trajectory here.
Yeah.
As you actually have to go and do the next series of Taylor Swift documentaries and concerts.
So what would be your dream Taylor Swift job if she held a gun to your head and said, you have your choice of careers, but you're working with me and you're going to get paid handsomely?
Oh, okay. I'll tell her jokes before she went on stage. Get her in the right mood.
I would do another documentary on her, and I would do it like the Beatles one where you get a little peek behind her songwriting process.
That would be good. I like that idea.
She's kind of prolific. She writes A lot of songs.
Yeah.
I wonder if she'd be having tea and biscuits like John and Paul were and Ringo and that would be great. Yeah, yeah.
So who's the Yoko that's going to break up Taylor Swift?
Well, I'm married, but so it's not going to be me, is it? She might be tempted.
That now.
She might be tempted, and
it's going to be someone who doesn't like cats. That's who's going to ruin it all.
Yeah.
Oh, it always gets back to cats.
Oh,
yep. It does.
This has been amazing. I want you now to go and feed your cat. Make sure that thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for being here with us. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
And Eric, I'll see you very soon.
Yes, I'll see you soon enough. Just driving up the street. There he comes.
See you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Quick shout out to Mike Nicholas for being our tech savior and Carmen Sclafani, also known as Wiser Time. Thanks for our music. And thank you all for listening.